The thing that I find most interesting is the shopping events. So the real flow is east to west in terms of these events and the impact that they have. So something like Singles Day in China is in the process of going global. It is beginning to become more of a thing in Europe, more of a thing in the US, etc. But it is also changing the way that we think about the Western retail calendar. It is a shift in retail power and kind of retail ideology from Western to Eastern consumer culture. But then also, I think it's interesting because sales are spreading across the calendar. So the sale period is extending.
That is Joe McDonnell, director of WGSN. Hello and welcome to this very special episode of the Create Tomorrow podcast. I'm your host, Cassandra Napoli, head of marketing and events insight at WGSN. Every 2 weeks, I will take you on a journey to examine how brands and consumers are creating tomorrow, whether that's through product innovations, actions and strategies, or online behaviors. Today is a very special edition of the podcast, which we're publishing outside of the traditional publishing schedule as we discuss WGSN's latest launch, WGSN Events Strategy. This new dynamic platform offers businesses access to essential insights across aesthetics, consumer, marketing, and retail trends, with the goal of helping our clients own the moment, create products that capture consumer attention, and most importantly, drive spend. Joe McDonnell, WGSN Director, and Liz Tan, Senior Strategist at WGSN Events, will join me to highlight this brand new tool for our clients. Joe, I'm going to come to you first. Can you please tell our listeners who you are and what you do at WGSN?
Absolutely. So I'm the director of WGSN. I look after everything that falls under the umbrella of consumer marketing and retail forecasting. So looking after everything about how consumer behavior is changing, but then how do you apply that to the marketing retail industries and translate that consumer behavior into direct strategies for brands.
Amazing. And now over to you, Liz. Please tell us who you are and what you do at WGSN.
Thanks for having me, Cassandra. I am the senior strategist on the events team, and I write content for our new dynamic platform, which helps our clients navigate the best way to engage with key calendar events. So what I do is take the macro forecast reports like future consumer, STEPIC drivers, STEPIC innovations, along with our hero reports, which is like a big favorite for our clients. So anything like the marketing forecast, youth culture, retail forecast, and really just distill those key ideas into the best strategies that are tailored to each particular event.
So I'm going to kick off today by introducing to our listeners why we're here, basically to promote this exciting new platform that we've got. WGSN Events Strategy helps our customers anticipate and capitalize on key events and moments throughout the year. So this is a dynamic new platform, really providing need-to-know insights and aesthetic direction for key events alongside actionable consumer, marketing, and retail strategies. The goal here is to empower businesses to own the moment, create products that capture consumer attention, and ultimately drive spending. With all of that said, Joe, I'm going to come to you now. Can you tell us a little bit about why events matter today?
Yeah, so we did a lot of research in advance of launching this product, and all of the research shows that events are how consumers manage and how consumers plan their lives. So obviously not everyone is using Coachella as a marker for the year. Some people are, some industries are. Consumers do navigate by things like birthdays, holidays, concerts, and the better that brands can plan and reflect this, the more effectively they can create products and services that align with what customers want. So something, within this space that the research shows is the growth of things like divorce parties, baby gender reveal parties. These are obviously super targeted niche events, but there are these new categories emerging about how consumers spend their time. And obviously WGSN is the leader in consumer-based trend forecasting. And this is an enhancement in many ways about how we forecast and how we tell our clients to create products and services which appeal to their customer. So that idea of understanding your customer, understand their priorities, and then understand how they plan their time, and events fits into that perfectly and adds a richness to that consumer understanding element.
Great. And Liz, what sorts of events will we cover? Can you tell our listeners a bit about the 7 event types and how we selected them?
Yeah, so we have 7 events and we have a very strict criteria because I feel like there's so many different events that we could cover, from very commercial, globalized to the super hyper niche ones. So how we did it was like we first came up with the 7 categories. So we have arts and culture, which will encompass events like Afropunk to the Art Biennale. And then we also have tradition, where you can find things like Halloween, Dragon Boat Festival in Asia, even, your regular ones that everyone celebrates, like Mother's Day, Father's Day, and Valentine's. And then you have religious celebration. I feel like that's quite an obvious one, but there's so many product and consumer design opportunities for brands here. So you have Lunar New Year, Ramadan and Eid, Diwali, and Christmas. And we also have shopping events. This is a big ask, and a lot of our clients can play into this, and even the retailers. So things like Amazon Prime Day will be highlighted here. We also have Singles Day and the 618 Shopping Festival. We have sporting events, which is this is like a big opportunity across every single product category. Not just like marketing, I think, and obviously sports and outdoor is a big one, and it's a new product vertical that we have. But the sporting events just bring about so many new opportunities for like food and drink as well. So we'll be covering the tennis Grand Slams, which was also very exciting last year. So I'm excited to witness the competitions this year. And we have things like Olympics, global football, and then on to the more music-focused ones. So we have music festivals. I think that's a big one. And we have selected a few where our clients can really reach people on a global scale. Lastly, this is probably my favorite, which is moments. So that's my favorite type of event that we're covering. And every year this will change. Those are moments will be events that have cultural significance and present product and marketing opportunities across different regions.
Amazing. So there's 7 event types, lots of events within each event type. Most of them will kind of stand true every single year because Halloween and Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, these happen annually, but the moments will be different. Can you tell us a little bit about what goes into selecting some of those moments? You said that there was strict criteria. What is that?
The first thing is that we look at whether it powers innovation. So whether this event will challenge businesses to create new products, how can marketing teams create new engagement strategies, activations, how can they push the creative boundaries? Okay, so we have a strict criteria for selecting events. The first one will be cultural amplification. So we will look at how will this event drive buzz on social media and what impact this will have youth and digital culture, and to what extent will this event impact and shape future generations and lifestyles. The second criteria will be looking at on-the-ground presence. So how can brands really launch in real life and digital activations around the event? Should our clients participate in these events? Because some of them are super relevant to like a fashion brand, but not as relevant to a food and drink. So vice versa, and we will help brands navigate that. The third one is retail opportunities. So we'll look at how this event can help brands bring about collaboration, exclusive merch, services, and retail experiences. The fourth criteria is the cross-industry impact. So how can these events create new partnership opportunities and sales opportunities? Fifth will be having a global reach. As you know, all our forecasts are super global. So we want to make sure that they have an impact on consumers all over the world. And we also ensure that the events that we cover tie into at least 3 or more of our STEPIC pillars. So that is society, technology, environment, politics, industry, and creativity. And lastly, whether it powers innovation.
I'd also like to hear a little bit more about the aesthetic direction. So a number of our content pieces will feature aesthetic direction, taking inspiration from seasonal color and design forecasts on the product side verticals and basically filtering them through the lens of the event. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier how a lot of our events, especially tradition and religious celebrations, they happen every single year. So we want to help our clients navigate what is different from Christmas in 2025 and Christmas in 2026. And having the not just having a consumer strategy tied to it that will make a big difference to our clients, but also having this design direction, helping them navigate how can they visualize a product, a campaign, or a mood that they want to create for the event specifically. So we tie all our aesthetic strategies back to our color and design directions, which is a forecast on all our product verticals. It gives our clients a taste of what they can get from engaging with the different product verticals. So things like fashion, food and drink, interiors. We bring all of that and tie it back to the event.
Okay, so now that we have all of that context, I'd like to highlight one of the events from each category just to give our audience a bit of insight into what they can expect on the platform when they log on now that we've launched. So Joe, I'll come to you first. What can we expect from our religious and traditions coverage?
Well, the first thing to say is that religion is changing and traditions are changing, right? So consumers are developing modern traditions. You look at something like Friendsgiving in America, and obviously there's kind of equivalents all over the world for various other holidays. But it's this idea of taking something old and fusing it with some of the cultural consumer markers that we're seeing. So there's quite a lot of development, both in terms of how consumers are celebrating these events, but also what the events mean to people in themselves. So something like Christmas, the development of OSOs, which is something that, Cassandra, you've spoken a lot about on WGSN, this idea of other significant others. So gifting beyond the immediate family, gifting more to friends, to colleagues, to teachers, co-workers, things like that. That's beginning to emerge more and more, and people are looking for brands to curate gift guides, gift selections for these more unusual gift receivers, if you will. But then also religion is evolving and religious traditions are evolving. So globally, it might feel in some areas that the world is getting more secular. And actually the data is a data of two halves, right? Because simultaneously, lots of regions are becoming more secular. Other regions, people are becoming far, far more religious. So there's a growth of both sides. And actually, you look around the world, somewhere like sub-Saharan Africa has the biggest growth of Christians of anywhere in the world. And it's going to double between now and 2050 to 1.1 billion people. So in many places, this idea of religious traditions, they're being retained, but also cultural identity is fusing with that, perhaps more so than deep religious belief. So think of it like Christmas or Diwali celebrated amongst family, community, and increasingly among the non-religious as well. But then you can begin to explore some other interesting markers within that. So how technology is transforming faith, how technology is transforming events, and people are interacting with them in different ways as well. So it really explores that and gets to the nub of what those data points are and what those consumer insights are underneath what the strategies are saying.
Yeah, when it comes to religious celebrations and traditions, I think the big one is cost of living, right? Right now, those are standard, every single year we tend to celebrate those holidays, but we're also living in a polycrisis where cost is through the roof in many parts of the world, right? How can brands navigate that as we head into 2025 and 2026 seasons?
Well, there is so much content on WGSN about this. The main thing is don't go down that plug hole of too much doom and gloom. The world is, as you said, there's a polycrisis going on, which is that confluence of negativity and swirling issues. Your kind of consumers are frozen between potential international wars, climate change, economic collapse, and don't know what to do. And that can feel oppressive. So acknowledge that, tie into that, but also focus on those glimmers, those little moments of joy that bring people together. Nice thing about glimmers is this can stretch from a nice hand cream that you put on if you're stressed at work and it kind of the smell rejuvenates yourself, through to hosting a dinner party for Friendsgiving with your friends and family, right? So antidotes like that, but then also all of the big things. Offering value. Consumers are bulk buying more than they have done previously. They're much, much more price sensitive. We know from considerable amounts of research that generally speaking, in recessions, consumers trade down on those basics. They want to try and maintain some little luxuries if they can, some little joy, little glimmers, but then they'll trade down on the essentials. So these are cleaning products, household essentials, basic foodstuffs, and it's a lot more difficult to get them to trade up. So for brands, you're in this kind of two-tier economy, especially as you start thinking about Thanksgiving or Christmas this year, where consumers will trade down on the basics, still prioritize maybe the fancy chocolates, still prioritize gifting to their children or their immediate family, but might dial it down in other areas. So very roundabout way of saying positivity, focusing on little luxuries, delivering value, and thinking about value in other ways as well. So buy one, get one free, loyalty points, etc.
Liz, what about music events and sports coverage headed to the site?
I want to start off by saying that sports has just been gaining popularity just all worldwide. And I feel like, Cassandra, you had your NFL podcast, which I'm a huge fan of. I think it was brilliant. And the fact that like there's this convergence with sports with almost anything. So you have the sports conversions with fashion and food and drink. And that's also just coming through with more women just playing sports. So I think on the platform, you can definitely find content for every single brand out there, whether you're in entertainment or whether you're in fashion or beauty. The sports content, I think, applies to every single person. So, for example, one of the events that we'll be covering regularly will be the Rugby World Cup. But the 2025 one is focused on the Women's Rugby World Cup, which I am so excited to watch. I'm a huge rugby fan. And on the content itself, you can find everything from the more fun strategies that you can discover, which is like taking the game outside the stadium, which talks about offering the behind the scenes content and helping to drive like social gameplay and how to interact with people through gaming platforms, to things like raising awareness of period anxiety. So there's something for everyone, especially when you talk about sports. Our content will provide a good balance of how to engage with the women's tournaments and the men's tournaments. So that's something that you can definitely look out for. And when it comes to music festivals, we have selected a very curated selection of festivals because I'm someone who just like loves and could talk forever about music festivals. But I think the platform is here to spotlight, again, using the 6 criteria, we select ones that have more of a global impact. So you can find things like Lollapalooza, which actually has so many different variations of the festival that happen from Chicago to like Miami and also in India. So they have presence everywhere. But one that I'm really excited for our clients to engage with is the Primavera Sound Festival, because last year on our platform on WGSN, we forecasted the rise of pop music again. And surprise, surprise, we have the 3 pop girlies who are headlining the Primavera Sound Festival. So the strategies in that event itself will talk about girlhood and all the aesthetics tied to the people who are going to this festival. So brands can really stay ahead of the game and decide how they want to show up. Do you want to show up in pop-up retail formats in Barcelona, or are you going to show up in the airport when people are flying in to these festivals?
So Liz, for any listeners not aware, who are the top 3 pop girlies? Who's driving the cultural narrative forward in this regard?
We have Charlie XCX, how can we forget, and Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan. So I'm excited. I want to be there. So I have plans to go and hopefully we can get some exclusive content.
I think going back to the Rugby World Cup, I am based in America and I don't have access to rugby. I know nothing about rugby, right? But looking at the rugby content on the site has been so inspiring. And also there's so many cultural moments happening with outside of the game that are attached to the game itself. Like Ilona Maher, for example, she blew up during the Olympics. When that came around, she was on Dancing with the Stars. She's been shot for Sports Illustrated. She is a bona fide superstar in her own right. That's a major star within the sport as well. And I think there's so many, again, cross-industry tie-ins there, like we were discussing, lots of fashion opportunities for her.
And I think as well, Cassandra, you look at something like the F1, and I saw a stat, and then I'm going to butcher this, apologies, listeners, but it was something like 50% of all F1 fans currently have arrived at the sport through Drive to Survive on Netflix. So that entertainment partnership has just opened up enormous new fan avenues and kind of people getting to the sport. But even crazier, lots of people aren't actually watching the sport live, right? They are consuming it through that narrative-based content on Netflix, but then they are kind of circumventing the live races and they are following the drivers and in many cases their partners on Instagram. They're kind of getting the content from two different areas. It's all F1 adjacent, but it's not so much centered around watching the race happen on Sundays, which again is just a really interesting change in terms of how consumers think about something like sport, how they think about engaging with sport.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point to the platform, is that you don't have to be a fan to be a consumer of these cultural moments within sport or music or so on. I think I'm a prime example of that with Alona Mar. Back to you now, Joe. So can you walk us through what we can expect from the art and culture section as well as the shopping section?
So I think that probably the thing that I find most interesting is the shopping events, because we are, for the sake of argument, 20 or 30 years into these shopping events being a thing, because it is a relatively new thing, and they still are somewhat catching on in the West. So the real flow is east to west in terms of these events and the impact that they have. So something like Singles Day in China is in the process of going global. It is beginning to become more of a thing in Europe, more of a thing in the US, etc. But it is also changing the way that we think about the Western retail calendar. So it's also prompting brands across the space to think about these similar mega sale formats. So it is a shift in retail power and kind of retail ideology from Western to Eastern consumer culture. But then also I think it's interesting because sales are spreading across the calendar. So the sale period is extending. So they're no longer specific shopping days. So Black Friday now spans several weeks. Mid-year sales like 618 in China last several weeks. And then it's also offset against this idea of there's a growing resistance to excesses of hyperconsumption. And things like the buy nothing movement or Earth Day and kind of some brands are ditching these bigger sales to promote sustainability and offer repairs, plant trees, kind of flipping the script on how we think about shopping. But then again, from a consumer perspective, we've done some research here. Because everything seems to be in a permanent discount cycle, actually the amount of the percentage discount that consumers want in order to convert on a sale is around about 30%. That's what you consider a good deal. And I know just anecdotally, I'm sure you both on the call have had this. If you do enough digging, if you do enough searching around, you should be able to find a 10% discount online. And consumers know that. Consumers are savvy to that. So really thinking about shopping periods, thinking about sale periods, it goes back to your point earlier, Cassandra, about the cost of living crisis and delivering value. It really needs to have that woven all the way through, because a 10% discount, it doesn't matter if it's Black Friday, is not going to get consumers' attentions.
We also have arts and culture, things like Carnival and the Biennales. Can you talk a little bit about what we can expect from those sorts of pieces of content?
Yeah, so they represent big moments of creativity and big moments of togetherness. And we've balanced them across the world. So there's a whole range of different events and categories within this space. You look at something like Carnival in Brazil, it is a major holiday. It is a moment of collective effervescence, this idea of coming together and creating something bigger, community collaboration, creating new memories, etc. And it is an important stop in kind of the cultural calendar for Brazil, but also brings in tourists from around the world. And then quite quickly, you can begin to see how brands can align themselves with this, both from a creativity perspective. And, you look at something like the Biennales, and it serves a bit of a dual purpose of brands that want to support creativity, that want to support culture, can sponsor events, they can do pop-ups, they can align. But then there's also this idea of broadcasting and sharing what comes off these events as well. So what are the learnings from the Biennale? What are the takeaways? What is creativity doing, and how do consumers feel about that? So it's a question of balancing both of those and putting all of our subscribers, all of the brands in a position where they feel comfortable assessing, analyzing, and interpreting these events and what role they serve in consumers' lives.
Perfect. And like always, I ask all of my guests, who is somebody that you admire who's creating a new version of tomorrow that's really inspiring? So Joe, we'll come to you first.
Mine is quite boring and it could come back to bite me. So I'm going to go with it, but let's see where we end up. So I am a huge Mark Carney fan. I think in a era of kind of, for lack of a better phrase, silliness, a kind of an era of unprofessionalism, I think he is a really serious guy who is driving Canada forwards. And I kind of really think he is making logical, sensible decisions. And I know he's just called a snap election, so it'll be interesting to see if the people of Canada agree. But I'm a big admirer of him, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops.
Amazing. And Liz, what's your selection?
I feel like mine is the complete opposite of what Joe has chosen. And funny enough, we are going to cover him under moments. I'm going to choose Kendrick Lamar because I think I've always been a fan, but I think after the Super Bowl, he has really just established himself on another level where like he's a storyteller on top of being a rapper and a poet. And he's also somebody, we talk about like collective effervescence on this podcast, but he's just someone that has used his power within the industry to do good by like creating this new creative agency called PG Lang. I'm a huge fan because he doesn't really promote it and he just like uses it as a platform to spotlight other creatives. And that's something that like I will always get behind, using your influence to change somebody else's future.
But also, Liz, I think you would get on with Mark Carney. I think if the five of us went for a drink, I think that we'd all get on. So I think that's a good choice.
Kendrick is also a Pulitzer Prize winner, so there you go. That's the whole point of trend forecasting, is that people from all different walks of life with all different interests come together and forge the future. And this is a great example of this. Thank you to my guests, Joe McDonnell, Director at WGSN, and Liz Tan, Senior Strategist at WGSN Events. If you're a WGSN subscriber, look out for more trends at WGSN.com. If you're not a subscriber, please come and discover our services. We'll be back with our next episode soon. In the meantime, you can catch the CEO of WGSN, Carla Buzasci, next week on our other podcast, Lives of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Cassandra Napoli. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast, and see you next time.